Okay, I've decided I can't wait any longer. Today, we're going to learn some colour theory. Kia ora everyone, this is Heyjohanna. Welcome to the first ever video of my colour theory series. So, I've been putting off making this video on colour theory for so long because I knew it would kind of be a complicated video to make. I'd have to do some research and kind of plan my video rather than just wing it. But it's also something I've been wanting to do for a while because for years I found colour theory so complicated and I just couldn't get my head around it. I've decided to split up the video into several shorter and simpler videos so I'm not just dumping all this information on you at once, and this way you can go through and just watch the one that you want and not have to listen to, 20 minutes of information that you already know. I feel like I'm finally at a stage where I understand colour theory pretty well, and I just want people to know how simple it can be, and much more importantly, how much it can help you progress with your art. Oh, and also at the end of each video, I will do a small drawing incorporating some of the colour theory fundamentals that I've talked about throughout the video. So let's jump right into episode 1. Okay, so the absolute first thing that you need to know is that there is more than one colour wheel. There are actually many depending on what colouring system you're using. When I say colour system, I mean RGB, PMS, which stands for Pantone Matching System, and CMYK. A colour wheel is just a way of visualising and organising hues, so there is no single right colour wheel. Now when I say hue, what I mean is colour name. I mean like orange, yellow, green, red, that sort of thing. That's what a hue is. Each of these is a hue in its own right. I will go over terminology in another video, but for now that's all you need to know. Hue is pretty simple. So today I will be going over how subtractive colour wheels work, and this is the model that we will be using when mixing pigments or inks. So first we begin with our 3 primary colours. There is a little bit of debate about what the primary colours actually are for mixing paint and ink. As children we are taught that the primary colours are red, yellow and blue. Mixing red and yellow will give you orange, red and blue will give you purple, and yellow and blue will give you green. This, however, is an oversimplification and really an archaic model that has just been handed down for years. Now the true primary colours of pigment and ink are actually cyan, magenta and yellow. So we can start the construction of our colour wheels by putting the 3 primary colours into a triangle around a circle, just like so. So I should probably mention that I am doing both of them just to show you the difference between the yellow, red, blue model and the cyan, magenta and yellow. Also, I'm using these alcohol-based markers because they show the sort of transitions between the colours really well, and they're just perfect for what I'm trying to show you. So you could see why cyan would be simplified to blue and magenta to red, as these are likely terms that young children already know. Unfortunately, that oversimplification has meant that everyone has been taught misinformation, and the thing is, we never really relearn. Think about how printer ink cartridges hold cyan, magenta and yellow ink, as well as black, CMYK. The K stands for key, by the way. That's because those are the colours needed to make all of the others. Once you learn that cyan, magenta and yellow are the true primary colours, you'll find mixing colours is so much easier. Obviously I'm using alcohol markers for this process, but this works with all manner of different mediums. It works with paints, it works with coloured pencils, it works with chalk pastels, just everything, and I will show you that towards the end of the video. Okay, so next we need to mix our primary colours together to create our secondaries. So we were taught that mixing red and yellow will make orange, and you might think, well, okay, that's a passable orange. Yellow and blue make green, yep, that's sort of green. And red and blue make purple. Well, I suppose if you squint really hard, that's a kind of purple. But if we use cyan, magenta and yellow, you can see that the magenta and the yellow make a really bright and vibrant red, the yellow and cyan make a bright green, and the magenta and the cyan make this gorgeous indigo. Now you might be able to see a pattern here, but we've still got one more step to go. Finally, to complete our colour wheels, we need to make our tertiary colours by mixing a secondary colour and a primary colour together. There will be 6 tertiary colours as we fill in the gaps around the edge here. We should be making a red-orange, red-violet, blue-violet, blue-green, yellow-green, and yellow-orange. The idea is that each of the tertiary colours is more leaning towards one of the primary colours. So you've got a purple which is more red, or an orange which is more yellow, and that's basically how that works. The theory is that you can get a nice range of hues from doing this and mixing all these colours together, But as you can see from this colour wheel, it kind of doesn't really work properly. Now we're left with this muddy, dull colour wheel, and you might be thinking, well, what did I do wrong? How could I possibly have messed up mixing two colours together? And the truth is, you did nothing wrong. You were just taught the wrong primary colours. And you can see why that happens. Again, as a kid, when you learn this, it's much easier to learn red and blue rather than magenta and cyan, because you probably already know the colours red and blue, and it's probably difficult for you to wrap your head around what magenta and cyan actually are. So it's no wonder that we lumped those into groups. So let's make the tertiary colours from the cyan, magenta and yellow primaries. So from this we get a really gorgeous rose colour, orange, lime green, turquoise, blue and purple. You can of course name these similar to how I named them in the yellow, red, blue scheme, but I don't think that magenta-ish red sounds very good. It's much easier to give them a different name like rose or lime or turquoise. They're actually also closer to those colours than just a yellowish green. You can definitely see that it's a vibrant lime green colour. So there you have it. You have your muddy kind of dull colour wheel over here and your gorgeous vibrant colour wheel over here. This is the colour wheel that everyone ends up creating when they try and mix the red and the yellow to get the orange, and this is the colour wheel that everyone wants to create when they start mixing their colours. The difference of course is the primary colours, magenta, yellow and cyan versus red, yellow and blue. So there you are, it's not your fault at all. I did this for so many years and didn't understand how artists could mix these beautiful, vibrant colours. I was 21 years old before I learned that magenta, yellow and cyan were actually the true primaries and could yield better results. So don't blame yourself for that one. What I usually like to do after I finish the outer colour wheel is put a triangle in the middle. This gives me an opportunity to really highlight what the primaries are, as well as gives me an opportunity to mix all three of the primaries together. Once you've done this, it should be a muddy, browny black kind of a colour. Theoretically, it should be black, but with the markers, it doesn't quite get there. So I know I've kind of been bashing YRB, but in truth there's nothing wrong with this colour wheel, and in fact it's important to know this in case you wanted to mix a more muted palette. Some people like to think of the CMY colour wheel as the warm colour wheel and the YRB as the cool colour wheel, and there is definitely some truth to that, but really it comes down to where your primary colours are. Dividing up the colour spectrum into hues is more or less arbitrary, because how can you divide up a seamless spectrum? Your red might be more leaning towards an orange or else be a slightly darker shade, and the same goes for your blue and yellow. How do you know that your blue isn't more green leaning or your yellow isn't more orange leaning? Both of those colours will produce muddier tones once mixed together. Using cyan, magenta and yellow just gives you the most vibrant outcome. Plenty of traditional artists still use yellow, red and blue, but you should know that if you're trying to achieve this, but it always ends up looking more like this, change your primaries. Use cyan, magenta and yellow. And just by the way, this does work across all mediums, it's not just markers. Copic markers, red and blue, yuck. Magenta and cyan, hell yeah. Oh, red and blue, why? Magenta and cyan, yes. Coloured pencils, red and blue, just ugh. But magenta and cyan, yeah baby. Watercolour, red and blue, no. But magenta and cyan, oh yeah. Even chalk pastels, red and blue, no thanks. But magenta and cyan, I mean, hell yeah, look at that colour. Anyway, you get the point. So that really concludes the colour theory lesson for today. Hopefully you now know about the true primaries of pigment and ink and have the knowledge to create your own colour wheel using whatever medium you desire. I personally have these two colour wheels which just sit in my shelf and I'm able to reference them when I need it, so I definitely recommend you doing that as well. I'm now going to use this knowledge of the cyan, magenta, yellow primaries and colour wheel to colour this illustration that I did earlier. It's kind of going to be a 3-marker challenge, so I'm going to demonstrate how many colours you can get from using just these three, cyan, magenta and yellow. So let's get into that. So this was like the easiest 3-marker challenge ever. Even with a random selection of 3 markers, usually you can get a reasonable palette by just mixing the colours together, but these 3 colours gave me a literal rainbow of hues to work with. The tricky part was actually dealing with the fact that the colours were all so saturated. The magenta, cyan and yellow ink that I was using were the most saturated and purest forms of the colour possible, which meant that the entire piece was going to turn out so vibrant. I kept this in mind while I was sketching this out, and I decided to kind of lean into it and create a bright and bubbly candy-obsessed character. Normally I would never go for such a saturated colour palette because it can be quite intense to look at and I prefer slightly more muted tones anyway. But the point of this was to demonstrate the capabilities of 3 inks, and I think I managed to make my point here. Actually, if you think about it logically, it really shouldn't be surprising that I could get so many colours from these 3 inks, considering printers manage to get a full range of hues and saturation much more effectively than I managed to do. But, you know, give me a break, I'm not a computer. And apart from the outlines, I didn't even use black, so checkmate, printers. Just look at the range of colours that you can get from just literally 3 markers. I don't know why this doesn't blow the minds of more people, because it blows my mind, and I've done this so many times. It was probably a year ago that I realised that magenta, cyan and yellow were the true primary colours, and since then, every now and again, I grab out my magenta marker and my yellow marker and I mix them together, and I'm just like, whoa, look at that red. Like, it actually blows my mind. So I cannot get over how amazing this is and how more people don't know that these are the true primary colours. I mean, come on, it's so much better once you learn this. You're able to just produce so much better art. How was this not lesson 1 in art school? The school system has failed me. So here we are. Granted, this is not my favourite drawing in the world, but it does demonstrate very clearly how many colours you can get by just using cyan, magenta and yellow. This piece actually turned out exactly as I wanted it to. It's very vibrant, very colourful, and you probably wouldn't guess that all it took was these 3 markers. I want to thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you want to see any more colour theory videos and hear me rant more about the failings of the school system. Kia ora everyone, have a wonderful evening, and I will see you next week. Bye!